The bustling space station of Earth was alive with activity. Ships from dozens of star systems docked along its gleaming arms, and the air was thick with the hum of engines, chatter, and the occasional clang of maintenance crews at work. Lieutenant Kale, a human envoy recently assigned to the station, moved through the corridors with calm purpose. His eyes, sharp and attentive, caught every movement, every flicker of light, every subtle interaction between the beings around him. Among the crowd of alien delegates and traders, one figure stood out, Drina, a tall, bioluminescent alien whose every movement seemed perfectly controlled, deliberate and precise. Drina's skin shimmered in patterns that shifted with her mood or thoughts, a natural language of light. Her long, elegant limbs moved with a grace that few could match. She had claimed to the delegates earlier that day that her species did not feel pain as humans did. It was a bold statement, one that had drawn murmurs of disbelief and curiosity from every species present. Kale had been listening quietly, taking in her confidence, but not yet convinced. Humans were tough, he knew, but even they had their limits. The idea that an entire species could exist without the capacity for pain was something he had to see for himself. The debate took place in a broad chamber designed for interstellar diplomacy. Holographic screens displayed data, charts, and live recordings from other parts of the station. Drina moved to the center, her glow adjusting to a pale, even pattern that signaled calmness, or perhaps challenge. She demonstrated minor burns on her own skin, holding a small crystalline rod against her arm and showing no reaction. The lights on her skin flickered briefly but never fully intensified, never betrayed any hint of discomfort. The other delegates watched in a mixture of awe and skepticism. Some took notes, others simply stared, unsure whether they were witnessing science or spectacle. Kale stepped forward, his stance relaxed but deliberate. "If you feel nothing," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "then you would not react to something truly sharp or dangerous. Right?" His words carried both curiosity and caution. He had seen countless experiments, both human and alien, and he understood the risks of pushing boundaries. But he also understood the value of testing the truth, of proving understanding through observation. Drina's bioluminescent patterns flickered, a subtle smile forming on her lips. "I suggest you be careful, human," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "Humans have a very peculiar pain response, far too sensitive for you to endure. But I will accept your challenge if you wish." Her words were not an invitation to play, but a careful measurement of her opponent's intent. That night, the testing wing of the station was quiet. Most of the personnel had gone to their quarters, leaving the vast lab nearly empty except for Kale, Drina, and the scattered instruments used for their experiment. Kale observed Drina as she manipulated delicate alien tools, assembling a small machine of unknown function. Her hands moved with precision, and her body remained perfectly poised, as if she were immune to distraction or fatigue. The air was tense, heavy with the quiet anticipation of what was to come. Then, as if fate decided to intervene, an accident occurred. One of the containment fields faltered unexpectedly, and a sharp, crystalline shard flew across the lab. Kale's reflexes were instantaneous. He lunged forward, catching Drina just as the shard grazed her arm. She tumbled to the floor, her bioluminescent pattern stuttering for the briefest moment, a flicker that mirrored human fear and tension. Kale's heart pounded. He had expected her to remain indifferent, but the reaction had been unmistakable, and he realized that her body, despite all appearances, could indeed feel. Kale helped her to her feet, his hands firm but gentle. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning for any sign of injury. Drina's glow stabilized quickly, her pride apparently preventing her from showing vulnerability. "It is nothing," she said, brushing herself off. Yet Kale noticed subtle changes, the tightening of her muscles, the slight clench of her jaw, the brief flash of pain in her patterns. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but Kale was trained to notice such things. He realized that even an alien species that claimed immunity to pain had thresholds, sensations that manifested differently but were present nonetheless. The accident broke the barrier between them, and an unexpected bond began to form. Drina, who had always been so confident and self-assured, now allowed herself a moment of hesitation. Kale, on the other hand, felt a rare sense of respect for her resilience. She had faced danger without panicking, without relying on someone else entirely, but she was not immune. The realization that even aliens could experience something akin to pain, but differently, shifted the dynamic between them. Over the next few days, Kale and Drina continued their experiments, carefully controlled and observed. They began with minor tests, touching, temperature changes, and gentle prods to study reactions. Kale noticed that Drina's responses were subtle but consistent, tiny shifts in her glow, micro-movements of muscles, or a brief pause in her breathing. She tried to maintain her composure, to appear as though nothing affected her, but the signs were there. Kale began to document the observations meticulously, careful not to overstep boundaries but determined to understand. Drina, in turn, watched Kale's responses. She marveled at the human's endurance, how he remained calm even when minor discomforts were introduced. Humans, she realized, were complex creatures. Their reactions were intense, but their resilience was remarkable. She began to respect him not just as a fellow being, but as someone who understood the value of endurance and perception. The experiments became a subtle dance of observation, mutual testing, and learning. One night, as Kale worked late in the lab, Drina approached him with an idea. She wanted to challenge herself further, to test the limits of her sensations against controlled stimuli. Kale agreed, careful to ensure safety protocols were followed. They set up a series of controlled energy pulses designed to stimulate the nerves in ways unique to her physiology. Drina remained stoic at first, but Kale noticed the faint flicker of light in her patterns, a subtle, fleeting reaction that suggested awareness, perhaps even discomfort. Then, without warning, a miscalculation caused a small plasma spark to graze her arm. Drina gasped, her glow flaring in a rapid, uneven pulse. Kale immediately rushed to her side, applying a cooling gel from the medkit. His hand rested gently over hers, steady and reassuring. Drina, who had spent her life maintaining perfect composure, allowed herself to relax for the first time in days. The spark had proven something undeniable. She could feel, she could experience, and she could react, even if it was not in the way humans did. That quiet, intimate moment marked a turning point. Drina realized that her claim of being immune to pain was not entirely accurate, and Kale understood that aliens, like humans, had depths of sensation and experience that could not be reduced to a simple statement. Respect and trust began to grow between them, forming a bridge between human understanding and alien physiology. The lab, once a place of pure observation and experimentation, became a space for dialogue, for exchange of knowledge, and for mutual learning. Drina shared stories of her species, of challenges they faced, of ways in which their senses differed from humans. Kale shared tales of human resilience, of survival against impossible odds, and of the lessons pain had taught him about endurance, trust, and connection. Each story, each interaction, deepened their understanding of one another. By the end of the first week, a subtle transformation had occurred. What had begun as a challenge, a question of biology and sensation, had evolved into something more. They were learning not just about science, but about each other. The mutual respect that grew in those quiet, tense, and sometimes startling moments laid the foundation for something neither had expected. Even across species, even across the vast gulf of experience and perception, there was room for connection, for understanding, and for discovery. As Kale left the lab that night, he looked back at Drina. She stood there, her glow gentle and even, yet there was a new depth to her posture, a quiet acknowledgement of what had happened. He understood that the journey ahead would not be easy, that there would be more experiments, more challenges, and perhaps more moments that tested both their limits. But for the first time, he saw her as more than a brilliant alien scientist. He saw her as someone capable of understanding, capable of feeling, and capable of connection. The space station continued to hum with life, unaware of the subtle bond forming in one of its quieter corridors. Cale knew that the experiment had only just begun, and that what they discovered in the coming days could change not only their understanding of biology, but their perception of trust, endurance, and the very essence of being. For now, though, he walked away with a sense of purpose and anticipation, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the boundaries between species and between understanding and connection were far more flexible than he had ever imagined. The next morning, the station hummed with renewed energy. The accident in the lab had caused whispers among the delegates, but Cale and Drina knew that what happened was more than a mere incident. It was a lesson, a turning point. Cale walked toward the testing wing, his mind focused yet alert. Today's session was not about proving who was right or wrong anymore. It was about understanding, exploring, and learning together. Drina was already waiting. She stood by the observation table, her glow steady but softer than usual, reflecting a quiet concentration. Her eyes, the deep luminous pools characteristic of her species, followed Cale's movements. She had spent the night analyzing the data from the previous day's accident, wondering at the subtle reactions her body had shown. She had thought herself immune to sensations humans called pain, but the spark had proven her wrong, and she was determined to explore the boundaries of her perception. Cale entered the lab, his calm presence filling the space. "Morning," he said simply. Drina tilted her head slightly, acknowledging him without words. The two of them had grown accustomed to working together in silence, relying on observation and subtle cues more than verbal communication. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, one that neither of them had anticipated when their experiment began. The first tests of the day were small and controlled. Cale held a series of sensors and probes designed to measure responses to light pressure and temperature changes. Drina adjusted her stance, ensuring that her movements were precise, her body relaxed yet ready to respond. As Cale applied the probes to her skin, he noted the slight fluctuations in her glow, the almost imperceptible shifts in muscle tension. She remained composed, but the evidence of sensation was undeniable. Drina watched Cale closely as well. She had observed countless species, but humans fascinated her in ways others did not. Their endurance was remarkable, their reactions layered and complex. Even during the simplest tests, Cale displayed subtle cues, an involuntary tightening of his jaw, a shift of his weight, that revealed how sensitive humans could be. She marveled at his ability to remain calm under pressure, to endure minor discomfort without panic, yet she also sensed the intensity of his awareness. Hours passed with careful observation and note-taking. Neither spoke much, for words were unnecessary when subtle reactions conveyed more than any sentence could. Cale adjusted a probe and Drina's glow flickered briefly, a sign that she had felt the pressure. He raised an eyebrow, not in judgment but in quiet acknowledgement. "I see you," he said softly, almost to himself. Drina's eyes met his, and for a moment the quiet lab held only mutual understanding, an unspoken recognition of the connection forming between them. After a short break, Drina proposed a new experiment, one that would test both their limits in a different way. She had constructed a small simulation chamber, designed to mimic environmental hazards her species often encountered. Cale entered first, curious about what she had in mind. The chamber was a compact space filled with shifting holographic landscapes, spikes of crystalline formations, sudden heat bursts, and simulated sharp surfaces. Drina explained that the chamber could adjust stimuli gradually, allowing them to experience sensations safely while recording every reaction. Kale moved carefully, navigating the simulation. His human senses were alert to every detail. The faint vibrations underfoot, the subtle changes in air pressure, the occasional flicker of holographic light that simulated danger. Drina observed from behind a control panel, her glow shifting as she noted his reactions. She was fascinated by the human's ability to process information, react, and adapt simultaneously. Every step he took, every slight movement of his body, revealed layers of endurance and instinct she had not fully appreciated before. Then it was her turn. Drina stepped into the chamber, her form illuminated by the holographic environment. The simulated spikes and heat bursts activated around her. She moved with her usual elegance, but Kale noticed small changes. A brief tension in her shoulders, a flicker of her glow, a subtle pause before she navigated a particularly sharp formation. She tried to maintain composure, but the evidence of sensation was clear. Kale nodded quietly, impressed by her resilience and surprised at how human-like some of her reactions appeared. The session continued for hours, testing the limits of their endurance and perception. Each experiment was carefully recorded, each reaction noted. Kale and Drina began to discuss their observations in detail, comparing notes and trying to understand the differences between human and alien responses. They found that while the manifestations of sensation differed, the underlying principle was similar. Both species could perceive risk, discomfort, and injury, even if the ways they experienced it were not identical. As the day drew to a close, Drina suggested a more personal experiment, one that required trust. She wanted Kale to observe her in a situation that simulated genuine danger, not just controlled stimuli. Kale hesitated briefly but agreed, understanding that this was a step toward deeper understanding, both scientific and personal. Drina set up a scenario in the chamber, a controlled energy surge that could simulate a burn if mismanaged. She explained the parameters carefully, ensuring that Kale would be able to monitor her safely. The simulation began. Sparks of energy flickered across the chamber, harmless but designed to trigger subtle responses. Drina moved with precision, her body navigating the simulated danger. Kale watched intently, noting every shift in glow, every subtle muscle movement, every slight hesitation. He realized that she was pushing herself to experience what humans called discomfort, to understand it not just intellectually but viscerally. Then, as if fate intervened once more, a miscalculation caused a small plasma spark to arc toward Drina's arm. She reacted instantly, pulling back slightly, her glow flaring in rapid, uneven pulses. Kale rushed to her side, applying a cooling gel from the medkit he always carried. His hand rested gently over hers, steady and reassuring. Drina allowed herself to relax under his touch, her pride set aside for the first time in days. The spark, though minor, had proven something undeniable. She could feel, she could react, and she could endure. The moment was quiet, intimate in its intensity. Drina realized that her earlier claims about immunity were flawed. She had believed herself different, superior in some way, but the truth was far more nuanced. Her body responded to stimuli, her perception of sensation was real, and she had learned something vital about herself through this shared experience. Kale, in turn, admired her courage and resilience, recognizing that understanding one another required more than observation. It required trust, vulnerability, and shared experience. Over the next few days, their collaboration deepened. They worked together to refine the simulation chamber, testing not just physical responses but cognitive ones as well. Drina was fascinated by Kale's ability to adapt, to anticipate danger, and to remain composed under pressure. Kale, for his part, found himself increasingly intrigued by the complexity of Dreena's physiology and the depth of her intellect. Their interactions were no longer merely professional. They had become partners in exploration, both of science and of each other's perspectives. Late one night, after another long session in the chamber, Kale and Dreena sat side by side, reviewing the day's data. The lab was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of Dreena's patterns and the faint hum of the station's systems. They spoke little, but their shared understanding was palpable. Kale realized that Dreena's claims about immunity were not born of arrogance alone. They reflected a different way of experiencing the universe, one that he had only begun to grasp. Dreena, in turn, recognized that human resilience was not just physical. It was emotional, cognitive, and relational. Their partnership began to extend beyond the lab. Kale shared stories of human survival, of battles fought in distant star systems, of moments when pain had taught him lessons about trust and endurance. Dreena listened with rapt attention, her glow flickering in patterns that reflected curiosity, admiration, and perhaps a hint of newfound humility. She shared stories of her species as well, their history, their struggles, their achievements. Each tale, each anecdote, built a bridge between them, connecting their worlds in ways that neither had anticipated. By the end of the second week, Kale and Dreena had established a rhythm. They pushed boundaries, tested limits, and explored sensations with careful precision. They had proven to each other that understanding went beyond observation. It required empathy, trust, and the willingness to experience what the other had endured. Kale marveled at the subtle beauty of Dreena's reactions, the way her glow communicated thoughts and feelings that words could not capture. Dreena admired Kale's patience, his insight, and his ability to remain composed even in challenging situations. One evening, as the station's artificial night cycle began, they conducted one final experiment for the day. It was designed to be a test of endurance, not just for the body but for perception and reaction. The simulation chamber created an environment filled with shifting heat patterns, sharp crystalline protrusions, and sudden energy surges. Kale entered first, navigating the challenges with practiced skill. Dreena observed, her glow soft but attentive, noting every microreaction, every subtle adjustment in posture and movement. Then it was her turn. Dreena moved through the simulated dangers with grace and precision, but Kale noticed small changes, slight pauses, minor shifts in posture, and brief flares in her glow that revealed awareness and sensation. He realized that, though different from humans, her body and mind were attuned to the environment in complex ways. She was not immune to sensation. She experienced it differently, adapting and responding with intelligence and control. As the simulation concluded, Kale helped Dreena out of the chamber. Their hands brushed, and a quiet understanding passed between them. They had not just conducted experiments. They had shared an experience that transcended species, perception, and expectation. In that moment, both understood that their journey had moved beyond science. It was about connection, mutual respect, and the realization that even beings from vastly different worlds could learn from and influence one another. The night ended with a quiet conversation, their voices low and reflective. Kale spoke of the lessons he had learned from observing her, and Dreena shared her reflections on human resilience and endurance. Neither dismissed the other's experiences. Instead, they found common ground, recognizing the value in differences as much as in similarities. The bond they were forming was subtle but undeniable, built not on force or claim, but on understanding, respect, and shared discovery. The station's corridors were unusually quiet that morning. A low hum of engines and distant chatter filled the air, but the tension from recent experiments still lingered. Kale moved steadily through the halls, carrying a small pack of sensors and tools. Today was not about routine testing. Today was about understanding extremes. He had spent weeks observing Drina, and though he had learned much, he knew there were deeper layers to her perception yet unexplored. Drina awaited him in the lab, her bioluminescent glow soft and even. She was calm, composed, yet there was a subtle intensity in her stance that Kale recognized as anticipation. She had spent the night reviewing the data from previous sessions, analyzing every reaction, every flicker of her own glow, and every nuance in Kale's behavior. Despite her earlier claims that aliens did not feel pain, she had now accepted that her species experienced sensation differently, and she was curious to understand the limits of that experience. "Good morning," Kale said as he entered. His voice was steady, carrying a mixture of respect and quiet excitement. Drina inclined her head, her glow shifting briefly in a pattern that suggested acknowledgement and readiness. They had developed an unspoken rhythm over the past weeks. Each action, each reaction, each subtle gesture communicated understanding without the need for words. The first part of the day involved controlled exercises designed to test reflexes and endurance. Kale guided Drina through a series of tasks that combined mental agility and physical precision. Holographic simulations projected obstacles in the lab, requiring them to navigate shifting platforms, dodge energy pulses, and solve rapid problem-solving challenges. Drina moved with her usual grace, her body perfectly attuned to the environment, but Kale noticed the subtle signs. A brief pause before a jump, a slight tightening of her arms, a quick flare of light across her torso. Each small reaction indicated sensation, awareness, and adaptability. Kale mirrored her movements, demonstrating human reflexes and endurance in response to the same stimuli. Drina observed him with fascination. Humans were unpredictable yet remarkably resilient, their reactions layered with instinct and cognition. She realized that, despite her species' unique physiology, Kale's ability to endure and adapt offered insights into the universality of sensation and response. It was not just about physical pain or discomfort. It was about perception, learning, and survival. After hours of training, they paused to review the collected data. Drina's glow dimmed slightly as she examined the charts, her analytical mind parsing every detail. "You endure far more than I expected," she said quietly. "Your species experiences pain in ways that seem complex, yet you adapt and continue. Fascinating." Kale smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from his face. "Humans have learned that endurance is more than tolerance. It's about understanding limits and using them to adapt. Pain teaches lessons about trust, about resilience, and about connection." Drina considered this, her glow pulsing slowly in contemplation. She had observed many species, studied countless behaviors, yet she had not encountered a being like Kale before. One who willingly faced discomfort, one who could turn vulnerability into strength. For the first time, she felt a resonance with another life form, a recognition that sensation, whether human or alien, was a bridge rather than a barrier. Later, the station announced an unexpected emergency. A rogue asteroid fragment had collided with the outer docking bay, sending sparks, energy surges, and structural instability across the area. Alarms blared, red lights flashing, and the entire station was thrown into controlled chaos. Kale and Drina were immediately on alert, moving quickly toward the affected zone. The docking bay was a dangerous mess. Fragments of metal and crystal floated in zero gravity, energy arcs sparked unpredictably, and the automated system struggled to stabilize the structure. Drina's glow pulsed rapidly, her body tense as she navigated through the chaos with precision. Kale followed closely, analyzing the environment and anticipating hazards before they became threats. They worked together seamlessly. Kale guided Drina through unstable areas, pointing out potential dangers, while Drina used her agility and analytical mind to manipulate control panels and stabilize energy flows. Sparks flew close to her skin, sharp metal edges drifted nearby, yet she reacted with controlled precision, revealing small but unmistakable signs of sensation. Kale noticed the subtle twitches, the slight tightening of muscles, and the flares of her glow that indicated awareness and discomfort. At one point, a sharp fragment floated perilously close to Drina's arm. Kale reached out instinctively, deflecting it with a precise push of his hand. Drina adjusted mid-motion, her glow flaring as she felt the near impact. She had endured physical sensation before, but the immediacy of real danger brought a clarity she had not experienced in controlled experiments. She realized that sensation was not weakness. It was guidance, a tool that allowed her to respond with intelligence and precision. As the emergency continued, Drina and Kale rescued trapped personnel, maneuvered unstable machinery, and stabilized volatile energy conduits. Each moment required coordination, trust, and the ability to feel without hesitation. Drina's earlier claim that aliens did not feel pain seemed almost quaint now. She experienced sensation, she adapted, and she endured, using her awareness as a strength rather than a limitation. After the docking bay was secured and the immediate danger passed, Kale and Drina returned to the lab, exhausted but triumphant. Drina examined her own arms, noting minor burns and scratches that she had barely felt during the chaos. Her glow shifted, slow and thoughtful. She approached Kale, who was tending to a small scrape on his forearm. You were correct," she said softly. "Humans endure pain differently, but it shapes resilience." I underestimated the value of sensation. Her words carried both acknowledgement and humility, a recognition of the lesson learned not just through observation, but through lived experience. Kale nodded. "It's not about being immune. It's about using what you feel to understand yourself, to protect others, and to adapt. Pain is not weakness, it's information, a guide, a teacher." Drina smiled, a soft luminescent curve across her features. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax fully, no longer needing to maintain the perfect composure she had prided herself on. Kale's steady presence beside her reinforced the connection that had been growing over the past weeks, a bond built on mutual respect, shared challenges, and the understanding that experience, sensation, and trust transcended species. They spent the remainder of the evening reviewing the data from the emergency. Drina's analytical mind absorbed every detail, every anomaly in the sensors, every reaction recorded by the simulation and during the docking bay crisis. Kale assisted, offering insights into human perception, reflexes, and responses under stress. The conversation was technical yet personal, bridging knowledge with experience, analysis with emotion. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Kale and Drina sat quietly, reflecting on the events of the day. The lab was softly illuminated by her glow, casting gentle light across the equipment and scattered papers. Neither spoke immediately. The silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. They had faced challenges, learned from each other, and discovered the nuances of sensation, endurance, and trust. Drina finally broke the silence. "I claim that my species does not feel pain. I was wrong." Her voice was calm but carried weight, the admission of something deeply personal. "We experience sensation differently, yes, but it exists. It guides us, teaches us, and connects us to others." Kale placed a hand on her arm, gently, without pressure, simply a gesture of reassurance and solidarity. "You have always been capable of understanding, of adapting. You just needed to experience it, to see it through the lens of another being. Pain is not just about the body, it's about learning, connection, and resilience. Even you could not escape that truth." Drina's glow pulsed slowly, the pattern almost contemplative. She realized that the lesson went beyond biology. It was about empathy, trust, and shared experience. The human beside her had shown her that understanding was not passive observation but active engagement, and that connection across species required vulnerability as much as strength. In the following days, Kale and Drina continued their experiments, but with a new perspective. They explored environmental adaptation, reflexive response, and cognitive endurance, always considering sensation not as limitation but as information. Their work attracted attention from other delegates, who marveled at the collaboration between human and alien. The duo became a symbol of interspecies cooperation, demonstrating that even the most unlikely partners could learn from one another and achieve extraordinary results. By the end of the week, Kale and Drina reflected on their journey. The initial challenge, whether aliens could feel pain, had transformed into a deeper understanding of connection, endurance, and trust. Drina no longer claimed immunity. She accepted sensation as part of her existence. Kale admired her resilience and her willingness to adapt, to learn, and to acknowledge the value of experience. Together, they had discovered not just scientific truths but personal ones, forming a bond that transcended species, circumstance, and expectation. As they left the lab for the night, walking through the quiet corridors of the station, neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. Their partnership, built on shared challenges and mutual respect, was now unbreakable. The human and the alien moved side by side, a symbol of understanding and connection across worlds. The debate that had begun with pride and assertion ended in shared discovery, proving that even in the vast expanse of the universe, understanding, empathy, and trust could bridge the greatest divides. Kale glanced at Drina, noting the soft patterns of her glow. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. She turned to him, a subtle curve in her luminous features, and replied, "And I have learned much more than I expected from you, from yourself, and from the experience itself. Pain, sensation, it is not a weakness. It is life." For the first time, both of them understood something profound. The universe was vast, species were different, and experiences varied, but the capacity to endure, to connect, and to learn was universal. They walked together through the station, aware that the lessons they had learned extended far beyond the lab, far beyond experimentation, into the very core of understanding what it meant to be alive. The stars outside the station shone brightly, distant yet familiar, as if acknowledging the bond formed within the walls of Urith's testing wing. Kale and Drina stood together, not as human and alien, not as scientist and envoy, but as equals who had discovered that sensation, endurance, and empathy were threads that connected all beings. And in that quiet, shared understanding, they found not just knowledge but trust, respect, and the beginnings of a friendship that would endure far beyond the confines of the station.